Thank you for having me. I'd like to say that this exhibition embodies a number of things that I love: ballet and fashion, and Patricia Mears and her team have done an incredibly thorough job at presenting the historical connection between those two worlds. Upon recognizing that there were aspects of the ballet history that were underrepresented, Patricia asked me if I would be interested in sharing some of the contributions of Blacks in ballet. Now, I am a Black woman, a former ballet dancer with Dance Theater of Harlem, a journalist, and 5 years ago, okay, here we go. 5 years ago, I founded Memoirs of Blacks in Ballet, or MOBA Ballet. It's a digital platform that preserves, presents, and promotes the contributions of Black ballet artists, past and present. We have a roll call over that's an old picture, but over 504 professional ballet dancers, and over 150 of them have artist pages. Now, our historical timeline begins with 1846, with a man named George Washington Smith. He, along with Austrian ballerina family Elsler, premiered the Ballet of Giselle in Boston. Now, George was rumored to be mulatto. So, that blew my mind, because if in fact he was mixed race, then that would mean that in the late 1800s, a Black man was the premier male ballet dancer in America and helped popularize the form some 89 years before George Balanchine was even a twinkle in America's eye. Like other contributions of people of color, the ballet history has been relegated to the shadows. Today, we're living in a time when the shadow histories, elements of history that have been obscured, oppressed, or omitted, are being brought to light to reveal a more complete story, and sometimes changing the narrative altogether. Now, Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of England, said history is written by the victors. However, it was believed that he got that from Indian freedom fighter and politician Jawaharlal Nehru, who said, history is almost always written by the victors and conquerors and given their view. Or at any rate, the victor's version is given prominence and holds the field. Now, history is an instrument of power, and although history is based in fact, it is not neutral. It is racial, political, and economical. History is recorded and presented most commonly from the perspective of the dominant white culture. So those in power hold the pen. They not only get to write their stories, but everyone else's as well, deciding what's important enough to be recorded, dictating whose voices and stories are worthy to be in that narrative, and they create the villains to their heroes and the victims to their saviors. People who are marginalized in life are marginalized in history. So we always have to remember that history is only a story, not the story. But let me put it in modern terms. History is like Instagram. It's all edited. Hashtag filter on. You're welcome. Now, there's an African proverb that says, until the lion tells his side of the story, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. And this is how the contributions of marginalized people get relegated into the shadows. Today, I'd like to share with you not only some of the physical presence of Blacks in ballet, but also the influence that Black people, Black culture, Blackness has had on ballet in America, specifically as it relates to the legacy of choreographer George Balanchine, his movement aesthetic, and even his process. Now, Balanchine's original intention in 1933 was to have an integrated American ballet company. Now, this is evidenced by a 16-page letter that Lincoln Kirstein wrote to his friend A. Everett Austin, Jr., seeking financial backing. In it, he writes, to have a school, preferably in Hartford, a distance from New York, plenty of chance to work in an easy atmosphere. Balanchine is socially adorable, but he hates the atmosphere of both societies, such as LaFar loves it, and the professional Broadway theater. For the first, he would take 4 white girls, 4 white boys, about 16 years old, and 8 of the same Negro. Now, this is often held up to illustrate how progressive or naive Balanchine was in his thinking. I mean, he had been living in Paris, and he clearly didn't grasp the apartheid that existed in America. Now, I've always wondered just beyond that sentence, what was his larger plan, and how did he see that playing out? And it's a fair question to ask because in 1940, the American Ballet Theater, then Ballet Theater, had a short-lived Negro unit comprised of 14 black ballet dancers, but they did not dance with the company. They were separate. In fact, in the program, their names weren't even listed. So this is a picture of Agnes DeMille's Black Obia, a piece that she did for that premiere. Now, this was part of an initiative for the Federal Theater Project Negro Units. It was put forth by President Roosevelt at the time, and it was in existence from 1935 to 1939. And its mission was to provide much-needed employment and apprenticeships to hundreds of black actors, directors, theater technicians, and playwrights. So you'll see why black people are very skeptical of the diversity initiative sort of thing. This is 1939. So to go back to that idea of what was Balanchine, his original intent, if you read a bit further, we get an idea. They'll be firmly taught in the classical idiom, not only from exercises, but he should start company ballets at once so they could actually learn from doing. He thinks the Negro part of it will be amazingly supple. The combination of suppleness and a sense of time superb. Imagine them masked, for example. They have so much abandon and discipline, they would be nonpareil. Now, you lost me at masked, I'm just saying. Well, we do learn that these masked Negroes would be learning ballet with their white students, but we also gain a little bit of insight into the specific qualities that intrigued Balanchine about the black body and blackness, the suppleness and the superb sense of time or rhythm. It's important to note that at this time, Balanchine was speaking from an intimate knowledge of the capabilities of the Negro, because in 1930, he worked with legendary African-American tap dancer and choreographer Clarence Buddy Bradley on C.B. Cochrane's review in London. Bradley was one of the black choreographers who helped to shape the white musical theater dance aesthetic by creating dance routines for white Broadway stars. Bradley also collaborated with Frederick Ashton and Agnes DeMille, as well as Anthony Tudor. In a short history, Glover and Dunn, a contest of beat and feet, Constance Vallis Hill writes, Bradley's formula for creating dance routines for white dancers was to simplify the rhythms of the feet while sculpting the body with shapes of the black vernacular dances. Even though he simplified rhythms, he never sacrificed the syncopated accents of jazz, and he used the accents of jazz improvisation to shape a new rhythmic pattern in the body. So, as Balanchine and Kirstein are hatching this plan to start an integrated company of white dancers and supple masked Negroes with good rhythm, he's coming out of a creative exchange and collaboration with artists like Buddy Bradley. Now, Bradley also said that the most difficult thing to teach classical dancers was how to bend their knees. One of the elements that sets Balanchine's aesthetic apart from classical ballet is his use of plie, or the knees. He uses large fourth positions, large lunges, both in position, partnering. Balanchine's use of plie might have been influenced by what he learned from Bradley. Now, Brenda Dixon Godshall, who I love her, states, beginning with Balanchine in the 1930s, elements appear in ballet: angular arms, turned-in legs, bent knees, pelvic and chest articulation and displacement, leg kicks, heightened speed, densely layered phrases that were considered incorrect by the European ballet establishment. They'd been used in ballet to designate ignoble or comic characters, but not for dancers in central heroic roles. These same elements are basic syllables in the Africanist dance languages. So that speed, that sharp attack of movement that's associated with Balanchine, that lack of transitions, the polyrhythms, the syncopation, that detached, cool presentation that is a part of the Balanchine aesthetic are traits found in Africanist dance, which spans the village to the club to the streets. So now I want you to listen to Arthur Mitchell talk about Balanchine. And, okay, let's pray for me. Okay, wait, okay, I'm gonna click it.
Many people do not realize that he had a long relationship with the black community of black dancers. He worked with Josephine Baker in 1928. Then he worked with Mrs. Dunham, Catherine Dunham, in all the 30s. And he told me, he said, you know, at that time we were so poor. And Miss Dunham also tells the story that the three of them lived in one room, Mr. Balanchine, herself, and the composer, Vernon Duke, the composer. And so there was this wonderful exchange of information. And what was interesting, which many people do not realize, he would say, when we did episodes, he told us, go study with Martha, so you'll understand the source of the movement. He said, if you want beautiful hands, go take Spanish dancing. He said, if you want to use the back, take Dunham. He always used all the different techniques at that particular time. And I think the big bond was that we all loved Fred Astaire. We all loved Bojangles. And that sort of style, and if you just look at, I was just looking at some of the pictures of Mr. B. You never see him cut. He's always like this, like that, utilizing the form of jazz, what we call jazz today. And so those things, like when you see people that have that kind of that jazz impetus, it works. Case in point, we all know Symphony in C. And the finale goes. What he wanted, into the hip man. It takes on another dynamic. And so he used that. Then he loved tap dance. When he would choreograph, because he was such a phenomenal musician, he wouldn't show you the steps. He'd go, I want da 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 da. So okay, da 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 da. They said, what's the step? He said, there isn't anything yet. Let's just get the beat. Because out of that da 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 da, the movement came. It's not a glissade, it's not a jeté. And he says, you know, my dear, once you name it, it's already done. So let's explore. But he used the syncopation and the rhythm and the kinetic energy that you find here in America.
So, there's so much in that clip. First, I want us to concentrate on the way he talks about Balanchine, his belief about going to the source of the movement. And there's also the way that he describes Balanchine creating the rhythm of the step first before the actual step. And that sounds to me more like a tap dancer and is completely antithetical to the way ballet is generally choreographed. It's conceivable that this process was gleaned from Bradley or from African American culture of social dance. So about Cabin in the Sky, you know, Balanchine almost turned it down because he felt himself ill-equipped about the knowledge of Negro folklore. So it required him to educate himself about black culture in order to choreograph it. So in fact, he had a live-in tutor with Catherine Dunham. And this is also telling because Catherine Dunham was herself classically trained. In 1931, when she was 21, she formed a ballet company called Les Ballets Negro in Chicago, one of the first black ballet companies in the United States, preceding Balanchine. In 1938, she had created her first iteration of L'Agia, based in the research of her research in Martinique, and she had created elements of the Martinican fighting dance with American ballet. So she merged those two. Mitchell is directly confirming that there was an artistic exchange between them. These two makers were sharing space. They were sharing ideas and processes. Now, as to Mitchell, I find this very interesting. Balanchine is not only just rubbing up against black culture and blackness in collaborative spaces, but also with dancers. So where Arthur Mitchell was the first black person to be in New York City Ballet in 1955, he was not the first to attend the School of American Ballet. That credit goes to a young Philadelphian named, jumped ahead, named Betty Nichols, and she was the first in 1943, and she was joined then by Tally Beattie, and the two would go on to perform with Ballet Society, as we've heard mentioned before, which was the precursor to New York City Ballet. Louis Johnson was also a student at the School of American Ballet, and Dolores Brown, who is one of our black ballerinas, she was also a student at the School of American Ballet. She remembers him as having a beautiful facility and technique, and said that he was actually quite better than some of the white men in the company at the time. And I want us to listen to Arthur Mitchell's origin story.
When I was at the High School of Performing Arts, and I was graduating, and at the end of the year class project. And I started actually as a tap dancer, then I was a modern dancer. And when I graduated, unbeknownst to me, Lincoln Kirsty was on the adjudicating panel. And so I had Betty Wahlberg.
A musician.
And she said, Arthur, we just got a call, and that you've been offered a full scholarship at the School of American Ballet. And at that time, in your senior year, you go to auditions. And that's when I really came in face to face with prejudice and racism. And I would go to auditions, and I knew that I was better than everyone else, but I wouldn't be hired. And I had these conversations with myself. I said, now, Mitchell, let's get ourselves together here. I said, now, what can you do that will make you so good that people would have to use you, regardless of your skin color? I could do jazz, and I could do the Dunham technique, I could do modern. And I said, well, you know, if you get the classical ballet, that will give you something that will make you unique. And so I accepted the scholarship to the School of American Ballet. I didn't start classical ballet until I was 18 years old, which was another myth. And everyone had heard about Lincoln Kirsty, Mr. Kirsty's in the building, because Lincoln's 6 foot something, nose and a stern appearance. And so one day I was in class, and I came out of the studio, and I said, oh, you're Mr. Kirsty. And I said, I really want to thank you for giving me the scholarship. He said, you know you're a Negro. I said, yes. It was Lincoln gets that. And he said, George and I like you. And if we were to take you in the company, you'd have to be the equivalent of a soloist or principal dancer. I said, you're on. And so that's really how it all started.
Miss him, love him. So these are the three of the dancers that I mentioned that preceded him in the School of American Ballet. Now, I've always had a nagging question, and it's probably too taboo to mention in public, but since my brand is danger, I'm going to say it now. I always wondered why Balanchine didn't hire the black men who were more classically trained than Arthur Mitchell. I mean, there's no question that, now there's not to slight Arthur Mitchell in any sense of the word, but it is a valid question. I mean, Balanchine creates roles for Mitchell that highlight his blackness, his role in Puck, in Midsummer Night's Dream, and Coffee in The Nutcracker. And he full-on exploits his brownness in the Agon Pas de Deux, using the contrast of skin tones between Mitchell and Diana Adams as an aesthetic tool to enhance the choreography. The forbidden taboo of the white woman entangled with a black male, and the sexually explicit, sexually suggestive physical manipulation is a provocation. I mean, every time I see that pas de deux dance by a black man and a white woman, I get a knot in my stomach, like on a cellular level, because I sense the danger. Like I think about Emmett Till. Seriously, and I don't think that Balanchine was aware of how dangerous that could have been for Arthur Mitchell as a black man off the stage at that time. So Mitchell's blackness is absolutely leveraged in a way. But I think that perhaps there was something in Arthur Mitchell's interpretation of the ballet idiom filtered through his first dance languages of social dance, tap, and jazz that created an aesthetic, a dynamic that offered a particular sensibility different from those who had more ballet training. Mr. Mitchell would always say, that Balanchine would say, "Arthur, show him how it's done," when they were in rehearsal. So I believe that the way that Mitchell executed and translated Balanchine's choreography was just the zhuzh that he was looking for. Although Tally Beattie and Louis Johnson could also execute other genres, I mean, both went on to become prolific choreographers in their own right, more in the modern and musical theater realm. In fact, Johnson created Dance Theater of Harlem's first signature piece in Forces of Rhythm, which juxtaposed African dance with ballet and used popular music. But perhaps their affect was too balletic and suppressed that black affect that Balanchine was enamored with. So there's great evidence of confluence and influence of Balanchine and Blackness in those early days of the founding of School of American Ballet and New York City Ballet. I mean, he's creating Serenade in 1955, where we see the pulling off of the leg, Concerto Barocco in 1948, where their first movement is literally all rhythm and counterpoint. The way that the arms work to facilitate the movement looks and feels like tap dance. Godchild and scholar Sally Baines have analyzed the Africanist elements in the four temperaments, including the cakewalk and that lean back pose, and the flexed feet and the turned in legs. The first movement of Agon is full on jazz. Right? And so it's not a coincidence either that we see that this black culture and aesthetically in Balanchine's choreography is heightened when he's paired with Stravinsky, because he too was, as a musician, was influenced by jazz. There are few aspects of American culture and that black culture have not informed or influenced, and of course that includes ballet. Black culture has always been filtered through whiteness and rebranded as American. Back in the day, black artists would record a hit song, and then a white artist would cover it, and then it would be popularized in the mainstream white media. Black social dancers get filtered through the white body and are reclaimed or renamed, sometimes obscuring the origins and the originators. The same thing happens with language. Black Twitter is real. Today, with social media, we see black content makers creating dancers on black-dominated platforms like Dub Smash, and white creators, or should I say recreators, will copy without crediting, and then they blow up on TikTok. It happens in concert dance as well. I mean, we probably wouldn't have a legacy of modern dance without cultural appropriation. Truth. So, it's not uncommon. The problem is that dance history mirrors American history, or history itself, in that it's taught from the perspective of the dominant culture, ignoring and suppressing the organic cultural intersectionality, influence, and cross-pollination that is life. So why is this important? Why is it important to understand the fact that Balanchine and his work was so highly influenced by black people and blackness? Ballet, and ostensibly America, cannot authentically work toward diversity, equity, and inclusion if it's unwilling to acknowledge and include the contributions of marginalized peoples. I think it's part of the healing that this country is in sore need of. We can't integrate our communities if we can't integrate our history. As a country, as the world moves towards an inevitable organic diversification, the browning of the planet, spaces will have to be made not only for the physical presence of people of color and their participation and contributions. It's important that we consciously practice shining a light on these shadowed histories. As we work to change the face of both ballet on and off stage, and in leadership, as we work to expand the stories that we're telling and who gets to tell them, it's vital that people of color know that they don't need to be invited in. They've already been at the dance. In fact, they helped create it. Thank you.